you know, if that feature does work, there's a different way to get around it, all of that stuff, it's there for you. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, hey.
We're live. I was just talking about the dynamic of, we put this stuff out there initially, and some criticism, and they didn't take it as constructive criticism. They just took it as criticism. And criticism and building up a community, I think, is really, really good for the software, right? Every time we talk about a faster, easier way to do something in SDS2, we're making SDS2 a more valuable product.
Sure, absolutely. In the end, it's what we use, so it's how we make our money. I want it to be as good as it can be.
Right, we need it to be as good as possible. It's a big goal for us, and
Yep.
there's stuff that we've complained about, and then they're like, "Oh, that's a really easy fix," and it's like, "Well, great. Now you know that it's there. Go ahead and get it fixed, and we'll celebrate. We'll talk just as much about the good as the bad, because this really is the software that makes it possible for us to live the lifestyle that we live." How was your lunch?
Short. The lunch itself, it was all of the other activities that took the time.
What were you working on? I mean, gaming, I assume.
No, not gaming. So you know how I've had the issue with my graphics card, and I'm gonna have that sent out. So my Band-Aid fix is that my wife's PC happens to have an identical graphics card. So I've robbed her of a graphics card. She now has a dead machine. But when I built the new PC, all I had to take out of it was the graphics card that I already had. Well, that one will run with integrated graphics. So I'm setting that up, and I had to clean it all out because it was absolutely packed with dust, and reconfigure it. It'll only run one monitor, but it'll get her through the week or two while I'm waiting on my graphics card to get RMA'd and come back to me.
Oh, okay. All right.
Otherwise, she has to sit here to log in to help the kids with their schoolwork and to deal with, home finances and all that stuff. And it was fine for the morning to, let her get access, but long term, or at least, for the next week or two, I just can't have that.
Yeah.
It's just too disruptive.
So we've gotten this comment a couple times. Same guy. I don't know what BEH stands for, what their first name is, but guy dying apparently in Bayou City, according to his username. He's asking about 2021. Are we going to do a video about 2021? And we have. It's not as soon as it came out, but within weeks of it coming out, we shot really like a fairly long video of SDS2 2021, the new interface, what works, what's great, what we're excited about. It's in the editing bay. Unfortunately, this is a hobby, right? Like, this is something we do in our spare time, and it's a long video, and it needed a fair bit of editing to get it right, because there were a lot of starts and stops, which isn't great entertainment watching video. Like, I had to cut it together. I just haven't finished it yet. But we should talk a little bit about it. We're live right now, he's asking. So what'd you think of 2021?
Well, it's been a while since we shot it, so I'm kind of having to refresh my memory a bit, but I feel like it was a pretty solid performer. We weren't able to break anything, which is usually my go-to move, is let's see what I can annihilate. And I don't think offhand, I mean, maybe you'll prove me wrong when you get into the editing on this some more, but I don't think we were able to break anything. I think we found everything to be pretty functional.
Yeah, it worked. It worked really well. The stuff, my favorites, right? I remember the search function on all the settings, and just throughout settings, you can search for anything. You want to find a tool, you just type it. And one of our favorite jokes over the years on the show has been, playing the game called Find That Setting. If all of a sudden you want to switch your default bolt for joist to TC bolts, trying to figure out where is it in joist setup? Is it in bolt setup? Is it in, job fabricator standard connection options? Where the heck is that? It does make that process more intuitive.
It was much faster to find anything.
And
that was big.
Yeah, And I imagine one of the big things that people are curious about, right, is yes or no on the Lightning interface, the ribbons, the minimized toolbars, that whole setup. What do you think? What are your
I think that
impressions?
you're going to run into the same thing you do on any piece of software where you go from the old traditional style to the new ribbon interface. There's that learning curve, but ultimately it's just faster. We found that with every other piece of software that's introduced a ribbon interface. I hated it first. I played with it for a week or two, and then I wonder how I ever got by without it. And it'll be the same way with 2021, I'm sure. We haven't played with it too much. We just haven't had a chance, but I am looking forward to getting into it some more. We're working on getting it installed. We had that issue where we've had to wipe our system not too long ago. So we no longer have 2021 installed. We're working on getting it reinstalled. So I would like to see where we can go with that.
Yeah, and if you're watching along, you want to join us, the link for the Zoom room that we're in is down there. You could pop right in. You'll pop into the waiting room. I'll probably let you in, as long as you're not too much of a pain.
Hopefully you don't regret that.
Yeah, I don't expect you. It's like, have you ever seen the movie A League of Their Own?
Is that the women's baseball team? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
long
scene
time ago, but yes.
Where Tom Hanks comes out and he's like, "All right, girls, let's get out there on that field. Dozens of people are waiting for the game to start."
Yeah.
That's always
small audience here.
Yeah, which is just dandy. This is, I don't know. It's a fun hobby. I'm really, really happy with the ribbon interface, or with the Lightning interface. I think context-sensitive actions are really, really important. And I think one of the things, and modeling this job in particular really reinforced this to me, is the importance of, when you're in STS2, using your selection filters actively.
Yeah.
You have
that
to
was
do
tremendous.
Your right-click menu, everything just gets so much more powerful when you're setting your filters from one thing to the next. You just get a much better overall impression, or overall usability, when you've got those on your keyboard, and you can just go right from, okay, I'm doing a bunch of material edits. All I want to select is material, and eventually you get to the point where it's completely intuitive, right? Before you select a member, you're hitting the buttons to only select members.
Yep. That's the only way I fly. If I want to weld a member, a material, a bolt, I know the keyboard shortcuts to those. I don't even try to click them and just hope I get it right under default. I just set to what I want and grab what I need.
Well, and it makes you wonder, right? Like, should we be charging different rates for different users? Right? Like, we charge a rate for detailing, right? But if you get Matt versus newbie, the productivity in that same hour
yeah, it's a very different hour.
Very, very different. But we bill the same for it. I think part of it is because no customer is going to want to see that you have junior detailer rate working on their product, right? They're only going to want the best. And it's like, okay, I guess we can charge you for that.
But, we've got an engineering firm that we work with that does put the name on the hours. Yeah. And everybody's got a different hourly rate. And I always want the best guy's name with the cheapest guy's rate. Why is it why can't I get one of the partners to do this for rookie fee, please?
Supply and demand,
that's all
baby.
I want. Yeah.
Yeah. And that it'd be a fun way to motivate your employees, though, right? Like, put up a leaderboard. I'm charging this much for Jason's labor, but I'm charging this much for Dwayne's because I think Dwayne is that much. Can you imagine how destructive of an atmosphere that would be? just
You put them into
constantly.
competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just all right. You guys are fighting for that number one spot of who bills. Of course, we don't give them the extra money when their billing rate
See,
goes up.
now you're starting to remind me of the days I used to work as a mechanic for a Monroe muffler.
Yeah, and their billing rate was $180 an hour, and you got 10.
I got 7.
Yeah.
All the better, right?
Brutal.
Yeah, I remember those days well. You'd get a guy. I remember all the expensive mechanics would be up at the front because they wanted to hear the cars come into the lot.
Right.
If they could hear the car drive in, it's got brakes, it's got muffler, it's got something expensive that's easy to fix. And if they can't hear it, they're coming in for an oil change. Ship it back to Matt. So I'm back there running 3 lifts at a time, doing oil changes on 3 cars, running between them to drain, fill. And these guys are just chipping away at replacing a muffler. It's 2 bolts to undo this U-bolt and 2 nuts over here for this guy. Swap it out. That's $400, please. And I'm over there going, everybody's got coupons. I don't understand. I'm doing $5 oil changes
all day long.
All day long.
But the natural result of having those different rates would absolutely be our highest charged person would always be working on change orders. Doesn't matter what the job was. They
Right.
would just, all right, there's a change over on, Bayou. Go work on that one so that we can bill that out at full change order rate.
Right. Well, we had a job several years back where they put it in the contract that Sunday was golden time, and it didn't matter how many hours we'd worked that week. We got paid. It was time and a half or double time for Sunday. Yep. Well, guess what? My Sunday's pretty wide open. I got 24 billable hours every single Sunday.
Every once in a while, man, you get a golden ticket, and that was one of them because they literally wrote us blank checks. It was
they
like,
did.
We need this. We need these drawings worse than we need anything else. Just as much as you can work. Just keep working. So that brings up well, we didn't really finish on 2021 though, right? So in 2021, what if you could pick one feature? I know what my feature is, and I hope you don't use it. What's the feature that you're thinking of?
Honestly, I'm having a hard time remembering a lot of the features.
Oh, yeah,
but there was something about being able to split the screens that they had improved upon. And I'm struggling now to remember what they had done, but it went from kind of being like, this is kind of useful in some situations to this is really great, but now it's eluding me because it's been so long. Well,
and this is one of those situations where a bit of stern honesty from STS2 would be really helpful, right? Like if they would send us a rep and say, we'll talk with you about 2021, right? And we'll do, not a presentation, but just kind of let you control it. Then they could really pimp some of those features out and say, here's the new stuff, because without that, you don't know, right? A lot of the stuff that's new, the release notes just don't cover it. You end up.
Right. Well, it's usually spread out. So you'll have release notes cover some of it, and then they'll put out a webinar sometime after that'll cover some more. And then they have the how-tos, so you have to go check those out. But it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't know, you don't know.
Yep.
So if you check the release notes and you miss a big feature because it wasn't there, but it was in the how-to, and you're not looking at that.
Yep. Drucker in the chat stepped on my favorite feature as a checker, which is the automatically linked PDFs when you do output.
Oh, yeah, that's big.
It's great. But the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to send that PDF, right, to the customer. They're going to send it in for approval. The GC is going to print it out, walk across his office, scan it in, and then send it on to the engineer at 100 dots per inch resolution, scanned. It's gonna be ridiculous.
And then he's gonna write on it and scan it
and send it back.
Send it back.
Yeah.
We had a problem with that recently where they had actually asked us, could you guys send us a higher resolution PDF, please, because this is pretty blurry. And we looked and we're comparing the version they sent back to the version we sent out. It's like the version we sent out is a vector file. It's perfectly crisp. You can infinitely zoom in and it is a perfectly solid line. But the one they sent back was so blurry that you couldn't read anything. It's like, did you guys smear Vaseline on your scanner and run this thing through it a couple times to really make sure you got it as wonky as possible?
I think we just need to, like, I really wish there was a parametric marketplace, right? Like you put up a parametric that you want. I want it to do this specific thing, and I want it to cost, and I'm willing to pay $500 for it, like on Fiverr.
So yeah, I was gonna say like Fiverr, huh?
Right. And say, okay, this is how much I'm willing to pay. This is what I want it to do, and whoever meets that quote, great, go to.
Bruce will never be able to retire if that's something that we came up with.
There has to be a way to do it though, right? To convince, because a lot of times a parametric, the great thing about parametrics is that it can do exactly what you want 500 times. I don't need it to be able to do a slightly different thing. I need it to do exactly this thing 500 times, right? Like these copes on this, right? If I could have had a parametric that did just this, right? Oh, you don't actually see my screen.
I was gonna say.
But just did those custom cutouts, right, to make those the re-entrant cuts. I could have saved so much time and effort, and it would have been more consistent, and I would have been happy, right, to pay for that. But you can't. There's no marketplace for it, right? There's no avenue to say, all right, to a bunch of people, hey, I need a parametric that does this. I'm happy to pay for it, right? Because it's going to save me time.
Exactly.
So instead, we just train our slowly trying to teach our in-house programmer to learn parametrics. But then, he's not just a programmer. We don't have time to have just a programmer.
Right.
He's working on detailing. So instead, he's doing nothing. But it was the same thing with probably my least favorite feature of SDS2 all time, drawing templates.
Sure.
I hate them. I hate everything about the concept of them. I loved the idea when it came out, but the execution.
All I ever really wanted from those is if I were to run templates, the default standard templates, I want it to absolutely be identical to auto detailing, to just standard auto detailing, and then let me modify from there. But the fact that it would be different to start with means my step one is get it to look like that so that I can then start to change it. So it just kind of fell apart for me.
Right, because if we could get there, right, like if I could feel confident that when I hit detail with templates, it would get me a good detail. A large portion of the time spent in drawing scrubbing is just deleting things.
Right.
Like I don't even need you to add the correct dimension in there. I could do that real quick. I need you to take off the bad one. Right. Make it that much faster.
I've scripted the addition of most of the things that I want to throw in. So, anything that's like wire to ship notes, no paint, I've got keyboard shortcuts that'll just make that happen.
Yep. One of the things that I try to teach scrubbers is don't necessarily start with the detail that you're presented with. Change, you can use that DC for detail current piece mark right in drawing editor to redetail the piece and change its settings. So you get a detail that looks terrible. You can rerun it with different settings, turn off detail whole groups on user created material, and you get a nice clean detail back. And what I found myself doing a lot too is bastardizing the two. I detail it once with detail whole groups turned on, grab the whole groups that I like, copy them, redetail it, paste those ones back in, and fix the rest. Because I'm lazy, right?
Right.
I want to do the least amount of work that I possibly can while scrubbing that detail, and using little stuff like that really helps. Like we had those ones where you modeled it one way and then found out that my rotation was actually off by a degree, and so you had to rotate it. Well, now the whole group doesn't dimension properly, so I just deleted that whole group's or turned off that was the only user material. I just tell it, don't dimension that. I'll dimension that manually.
Sure.
Really.
Hey, if I could get back to parametrics for just a second, I want to address something. I had somebody actually email me talking about one of the parametric launchers that we use. He was wondering if I could show how we set that up.
Sure.
Okay, let me get my screen shared. I just threw up some.
Are you talking about how to set up a parametric launcher at all?
Yeah.
Because we have a whole video on that.
Well, he was looking specifically for where's this one.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think he knows where to find that. So I'm just gonna kind of go through this. And yeah, like you said, we've already done a video on how to make the launcher in general. So I'm just gonna give the location.
Is this the cons array linear?
Yeah, cons array linear.
Yeah, I set him a Dropbox link for it too.
Okay. So you go in under macro examples, distributed BV, and then he was looking specifically for cons array linear, which is right here. So now if I run that, I can pick any 2 points, and I've got the option for all kinds of different spacings. Let's say I want max spacing, 4 foot on center. Boom, done. And run it again. Yes or no?
Cool. I'm really hoping that, and maybe this is in there and we just don't know it, that all version of SDS2 will include the ability to map parametrics to a keyboard shortcut as opposed to just a button.
That would be outstanding.
Yeah. Because there are a lot of built-in functions that I'd like to change just a little bit, and we could do that with parametric programming, right? Construction lines is a great one, right? Like I would love just like a checkbox that says, "Oh, would you like to save this construction line?" Yes, I would.
I think the problem with that, and it's not like I'm, a programmer for SDS, but to me, parametric launchers are a bit more transient of a command because you can add and delete them completely from the program. So that may cause some kind of a headache with trying to get it to show up as a regular keyboard shortcut, but I'm sure if they put their heads to it, they could come up with some way to make that happen if that's difficult up front.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about that all the time. I can see why it would be challenging, right? But on the other hand, they're collecting presumably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in support fee every year, right? Like that's what they should be doing with that, is fixing that little stuff. And just being able to run a specific parametric with a key command would really make a big difference.
Oh yeah, that would be outstanding. Especially those parametrics like cons array linear, those sorts of things that are very generic and utilitarian across the board, not just the moment flange plates or something like that for a column.
Yeah.
But those layout ones are so useful that.
Well, I would replace CZ for add material construction line to the one that just does the flanges and the gauge lines.
Right.
Like I don't want all those other lines 95% of the time. Every once in a while I'll need the K distance, but it's exceedingly rare.
Right.
And just being able to throw that in there to make that permanent change would be great. Another one that I would use frequently would be the shape info.
Yeah, shape info. I love shape info, but I also always have to revise it every time somebody reinstalls SDS. Because I need the default to be inch fraction, not decimal. It's just I can't stand that.
Oh, that's one of the things I convert in my head anyways. But the thing that I would like changed most about the shape info parametric is that if a material is selected, it gives you the material shape info.
Well, a member.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Which you would change.
Right. If it's a material, pick up the material info. If it's a member, pick up the member. It only works right now on a member. It just picks up that. I would much rather have it pick up whichever is selected. And
what else would be great is if you could, if and I don't know if it's the sort that allows this, where you can continue to manipulate the model while it's running, but if you could continue to click on different members, and whatever you've clicked on, it just switches to.
Yeah, like just a live dialogue box.
Yeah,
Yeah, that actually
even
like
just the properties.
as a parametric change in general, being able to dynamically update a form that's always visible as a part of the interface would be monumental.
Yeah. That would be huge. To just have some sort of a properties screen of whatever it is you've got selected.
Right. And
I don't know.
NPM delved into it, but you always had to hit like a refresh button.
Right. Well,
That
because that's the limitation is, you've got to say, okay, now
what's selected right now. Right?
Reread what's selected right now, But I fear, though, that because of the way that it's designed, where it has to open and close all these individual files in order to gather this information, as opposed to reading it from a single database file, that could end up bogging down the system, though. That might be one of those, be careful what you wish for sorts of things.
See, we always say that, but it's 2021. And we were talking to Chris the other day about this. Apparently there is in SDS2 internally there is a switch now happening between programming languages. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the ones that he was that he mentioned, but one's modern and one is old, right? The old is the one that SDS2 is written in. It's the one that makes us feel like it's written for Unix, right, in 1985. And then there's the new, which is responsible for a lot of the new features. And he specifically mentioned the tree, which the SDS tree is a travesty.
Is that octree thing that he kept talking about whenever we'd have to run a verify and fix?
Maybe. What do you think in that project? What do you think caused all those verify and fixes?
I know that he had some issues with bent plate. I don't know if it was bent plate layouts or just bent plate materials. That was causing them a fair bit of grief. Honestly, I had the majority of that job turned off. I really just had the scope of it limited down to what I could see, and what we were working on was pretty simplistic in its specific design. I mean, it's just the same sorts of things repeated over and over, but it wasn't like it was all rolled and bent and wonky. It was just graphically modeled, simple material bolted connections.
I have a suspicion that the hard drive speed of whatever machine, because we were using SDS Edge, SDS Cloud, whatever they call it today for that project, I feel like the hard drive speed wasn't able to keep up with all the users that were in the project. And so, a couple people were grabbing the same file at the same time, and it was getting flummoxed.
Yeah, the read rate felt a little shaky, and I don't know what system they're using, if they're just using standard SSDs, if they've got NVMEs. I hope that it's not a spinning hard drive. I can't even fathom that would be the case, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine either, because SSDs are relatively cost-effective. Although, on our cloud, SSDs cost probably twice per hour what spinning hard drives cost.
Right.
But it's worth it.
Get what you pay for.
Yeah, the biggest thing SDS2 uses that I recommend people spend money on is hard drive speed. And you throw 10, 12 users in the same model, and it's going to get even more intense.
Right. I see that all the time just playing games. If I load into a game, I've got an NVMe, and I'm in instantly. I mean, within a second or two, the game loads up and I'm in. And then 5 seconds or so later, all the people with SSDs are in. And it could be 30 seconds, 40 seconds before the 7,200 RPM folks finally join the round.
Yeah. And NVMe is amazing. So for those who don't know, NVMe is like the SSD of the 2020s. It's basically a stick of RAM that works as a hard drive. It's got a special port on your motherboard. You plug that bad boy in, and it isn't 2 times faster. It's like 25 times faster, or something like that.
Yeah.
Than a
No cables. It's no cables or power. It's bolted right into the motherboard.
Yeah, it is lightning fast. I did it. I was doing a read-write test on a machine, just benchmarking it, and I was like, oh, it's like 5 times. And then I looked and I was like, it wasn't 5 times, it was 50 times. I was missing a digit off of how much faster the freaking NVMe storage was than an SSD. So
yeah, that stuff is lightning.
Yeah. So if you're building a new machine and you get that NVMe storage, if you can, you can't buy anything right now.
Yeah, I'm honestly nervous about sending this graphics card back.
I think you should be nervous.
I feel like they're going to just chop it up and add it to somebody else's graphics card and sell it at full retail value and then tell me to piss up a rope.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I mean, that thing, we got it in October, and it wasn't like it was a brand, it was an aging system, but it was a 1660. So a GTX 1660 in October of 2020 went for about $230. You find that same card on Amazon now, and it's one of the few cards I can still find, and it's an $800 graphics card. I've seriously got thoughts about when it comes back, just selling it and just not having a computer until the 3080s are available, and I can take the proceeds from selling this card to just get myself a free 3080 at the appropriate price once everything settles out. But I fear I may be waiting a year or two for that. So
you're a bit of an economics nerd, right?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Prices are high right now. They're going to come back down, right? Because we've got supply problems. But are we going to end up at the end of that with inflation?
I think that we are going to see inflation because of the amount of money that has been dumped into the economy. But it's weird at the moment because where you see inflation is when the money goes into the economy and then it's circulating in the economy. Now there's more money in the economy. And you get that when you get all the people that take their stimulus check and they go out and they buy TVs.
Right.
But the people that are terrified that I'm going to lose my job because my company's going to shut down, I need to store up this, I need to, stock up my nuts for winter. And they just pull that money right back out. So you've put all this money out there and none of it is circulating, or very little of it. I think that as consumer confidence grows, that's where we're going to start to see that money trickling back in and cause the inflation to occur. But until then, we're also going to be seeing the price gouging that we're seeing now. So I don't even think you're honestly going to notice the difference. You're going to go smoothly from gouging to inflation, and then that's just the price.
Right. So, but you don't think there's going to be necessarily a deflationary response to the inflation that corrects it? Like we're just going to jump up?
There could be, but I don't think we're going to have the ability to produce the supplies needed to make that deflation happen. Unless we seriously start putting factories here and just start building all of our own stuff again, I don't see it happening.
That'd be nice. I'm on board with the whole, give people...
I don't know why we're not making the graphics cards here.
Well, I think, honestly, it's one of those things where all the way down, it's turtles all the way down. The supply chain is the problem, right? It's like
right.
What caused the spike, as I understand it, in pressure-treated lumber is that what typically happens is that the forestry guys, right, the people who actually cut the lumber, they cut the lumber in spring, and then in winter, they go and they pressure-treat it. They go and work at all those mills where they do the pressure treating. So that's where all their labor came from. Well, when winter hit, COVID hit, so the guys weren't in there pressure treating the lumber, And then spring hits, they're out there cutting. They're not available to go back and do the pressure treating. So they just couldn't hire those people back again. They just weren't there for it.
Right.
And that's, frequently a problem with supply. Like, you need silicon for the chips. You need the rare earth metals. You need all of that stuff, which it takes a while for that supply chain to gear back up. And yeah, we've got 200 million vaccine doses handed out in the United States. That's not the truth in China, in India, in Russia, in South Africa, where these rare earth metals are coming from. They're not back up to speed yet, or they jumped back up to speed thinking, oh, COVID's gone, and then
India.
A whole bunch of them are feeling the impact of that.
Yeah, that's rough too.
Yeah, I talked about that while you were, taking your sweet time on lunch. Is the Indian economy and how that's going to impact detailers in, both in India and around the world, right? Like, are we actually going to feel that like we did when COVID first hit? We got an influx of work because
big work.
Yeah, the larger Indian firms weren't prepared to switch to a completely remote. They don't have the infrastructure to do it.
Right.
And that's what, politics aside, I don't, we try not to get too much into politics on the show, but infrastructure spending, let's go. Let's beef up the internet throughout this country, right? Let's find the ways that people can work remotely if they choose to, and give them that small portion of their life back. Reduce traffic, all of that stuff. I am all on board with finding ways to improve internet access and speed across this country.
Yeah, I would like to see it where anywhere that I can get an electric hookup, I can get a FiOS hookup. I personally am not a great big fan of most of my neighbors, and the next time I move, my plan is to not have neighbors. But if I can't find internet access out in the boonies, but I have electricity, now I'm looking at, well, I'm going to need to check out Starlink or something like that, some sort of a satellite internet. And is that going to be enough? But anywhere that you can get electricity, you can for sure run fiber. Why is that not available absolutely everywhere?
Right. And the funny part is that the government subsidized the running of broadband out to these rural communities. And the freaking broadband companies took the money and then didn't run the freaking broadband. They're just like, thanks. See ya.
Yep. Yeah, they did that out here. A friend of mine, he lives a quarter of a mile down the road from the nearest broadband hookup. And the ISP actually expects him to pay all the money to run the line down the road. Because if he wants to get it, he's going to have to shell out something like $10,000 to run the cable to his house. Now, once he's run it to his house, it's on the road. So all the neighbors can link up and take internet access now. He's got, a handful of neighbors.
Right.
They don't want to get in on paying for it, and they sure would love to have internet. So if he's willing to pay all the money, they'll sign up.
Right. That's like the classic example of where government is actually useful, right? One of those rare cases where, okay, all of these people need a thing. Not one of them will agree to pay for all of it, but we need this fiber for everybody. But I was browsing LinkedIn today, and I saw an employment ad for a steel detailer, and it's like the job is in Florida, and all I'm thinking of, who cares where the job is? Forget about that. It's detailers aren't moving across the country anymore to come work at your office. Not for less than $80,000. Why would I want to move? Like, if I happen to want to live there anyways, sure. But other than that, put it in the cloud, right? Forget about that.
Yep.
What do you want to pay my relocation expenses for? Why do you want to make me uproot my family to go someplace? Forget about it. No way.
Right. And not to mention, let's say it's a significant pay raise to you, but the place you're living now has a lower cost of living. And if you want to move to that place, it has a much higher cost of living. Well, I'd rather have the higher income of the higher cost of living sort of place, but not live there and have to pay that cost of living. I'd rather have the extra money.
Yeah, we're doing it the other way, where we live in New York. So, although
for now,
right, as far as New York goes, we're on the much lower spectrum of the cost of living, right? Like,
yeah,
you could buy a good house here, a really good house for $200,000, no problem. You know, you could buy a family starter home for $100,000, or you could before COVID started. Right now, the real estate market is absolutely bonkers. The house
it's been so weird.
Yeah.
I've got a friend of mine. She's on the village planning board with me. She's a real estate agent. And so you've got people moving here from New York City to escape New York City. But then you've got people moving out of here to get the hell out of New York State, period.
Slow learning phase.
I mean, that's how we're losing a seat too.
Yeah, we lost a seat in Congress due to that. Well, and you have to wonder too, right? Because the count was done during COVID. Did we end up not counting it? Because the difference between us getting a seat and not was 80 people.
89 people. Well, I was thinking about that this morning actually while I was out for my walk, and I thought, because they're trying to fight it now, I guess. I was like, well, if you were to have a recount now, how many people died since you did the count?
Right.
So you never know. It may go worse. It's not going to get any better.
Do you remember that West Wing episode about the census?
Vaguely.
All right. So the basic principle of the whole episode was, can we use math, right, to say this is how many people live in the United States, right? If we count an area and there's 23 people and we were able to count 23, but we actually know that there are 25 people living there and we're not able to count those other two. That's extremely simplified, right? But should we be able to scale that formula up and say, okay, it's New York State has 273,000 people per square 100 miles, and use that to figure it out. And it was kind of interesting, right? Because it's a discussion of perceived reality and reality, right? Can you ever actually count everybody? Can you? And I'm going to link it back to detailing right now. Can you ever actually check a set of drawings to be 100% accurate? It's the same idea, right? There are goals in life that you can, no matter how much effort you put in, you can still miss 100%. There's no such thing. There's just no such thing as 100%. Can't get there.
Right.
What the hell was I saying? So going back to 2021, when are we going to make the switch as a company?
Honestly, I think it's something that we should probably be looking for in the next month.
Yeah, like we're ready, right? Like we
I think we're there.
The second question, this is more of a, like, I know your answer obviously, but the audience doesn't. When you make that switch, do you start new projects only on 2021, or are you up converting your old projects into 2021?
And you don't want me to answer that?
No, I want you to answer.
Okay.
But I already know the answer myself.
Yeah. So 100%, I only start new jobs and just go from there. I will let the old ones stay in the version they're in. I haven't had too many issues bringing jobs forward, but it's one of those things, why take the risk? 2020 works. I'll just finish out the job. If you're super early on in what will be a massive multi-year project, maybe you want to, push that forward since you're early on in the job. But if that thing's been drawn leave it where it is. Don't take the chance. It's just not worth it.
I kind of like I agree with you, but I ask myself, is it PTSD? Right?
Absolutely.
SDS2 2021 and 2020 are 100 times more stable than certainly than 2019 was. 2019 was not a good year, but then pretty much every previous version, and even more so when we switched to haspless licensing, our reliability for SDS2 went up a marked percent, where we're not seeing segmentation faults anymore. We're not seeing panic error. Never.
Right. I would say it went up several orders of magnitude in stability. It just holds up. You know, we're not running verify and fix 3 times a day. We're not having errors and crashes. It's stable.
Yeah, and it's to the point where actually I was never surprised in 2019 when I had a crash. I was never surprised. Now I would be shocked. I don't see them. I just don't.
Right. Sometimes it gets slow and you think it's going to crash, but then whatever it's doing, it just finishes it up and, you're on your way.
Yeah.
But that's always that's my PTSD is when I get that, I click on it and the screen kind of goes gray and I get the little circle-y mouse and it says not responding. It's like, oh, it's happening. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And then it just fixes itself. It's like, oh, how nice.
So we joined another firm in their cloud infrastructure, right? They use the SDS cloud. And the thing that I found that I wouldn't be able to deal with long term is when they needed to run a verify and fix. If one of their users was still in the model, they just had to wait until that person would close, right? Whereas on ours, if somebody's still in a model after 10 minutes, I could just go and close them out. Like I could just, as the as the system
manager,
I can go to the system administrator and say, "You're done now. You had your chance," right?
Yeah, being able to just pull up somebody else's task manager and just say, "All of your SDS screens are now closed.
Right.
Have a nice lunch."
Right. Yeah. Obviously, not everybody should have that permission, but they're like. The team lead really needs that ability to go in and say, okay, close out all the other windows, just force them to close.
Right.
And it was frustrating. There was a morning, and of course it's always on deadline day, right? Like it's deadline day.
Everything goes wrong on deadline day. That's always the way of it.
Verify and fixes started. I'm not exaggerating. They started at 9:30 in the morning, and I was not able to work on that job because it was verify and fixing until 12:30.
Now they ran it several times, right, with different settings.
Yep.
But I think it was a good 20 or 30 minutes a pass, wasn't it?
It took 30 minutes for a standard pass and much more for one of the in-depth passes.
Right.
And the worst part about that is too that you don't know when it's going to be done. So you're constantly. It's not like you can just go and do something else for a while and come back. It's just in your head that okay, this is waiting there, that it might be finished or it might not be. That was
right. But it can become a watched pot too.
Right.
And you're just standing there. Come on.
Right. That's always what it is. You're never smart about it. Oh, I'll go take my lunch now.
No, in fact, I remember once I should have taken my lunch and I waited until it was probably at about like 80 or 90%. I was like, you know what? It's close enough to lunchtime. I'm just going to go ahead and take my lunch. And I had to leave. So I was probably out of the house maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and I got the message from you, hey, everything's back up, go back to work. And it's like, that's nice, I'm out. I'll be back in an hour. Yeah, that can be difficult trying to time out your day around something like that, but we haven't run into that. So I am curious to know, what was it that caused the issues with that? It wasn't brought forward, was it? It was started in 2020.
Yeah.
Or maybe it wasn't. They had it for a while, didn't they?
Based on the personalities involved, I wouldn't imagine them up converting a job.
Okay. It had a lot of stuff in it, as it had something like 714 user-defined connections. Like there's
Definitely
a lot of
definitely a big
definitely a big boy.
Oh, and we discovered a bug that goes along with user-defined connections. So if you use the member copy, right, like clipboard copy and paste to copy a member from one model to another, it tries to copy all of the user-defined connections that are in that job along with it. And in this job, there were 714. So we tried to paste in a member, and it said, you need to change your file sizes because you don't have nearly enough user-defined connections for that.
It was trying to duplicate them all.
And then we did it the one time, and then we went to go do it again.
A bunch of plain braces, too. Just a bunch of plain vertical braces with a single hole in each end.
Yeah. Yeah. That weren't even using the user-defined connections. But
right.
my bet is a programmer ran into the problem of, this member had a user-defined connection, and it didn't come over. I guess we better copy all the user-defined connections just in case.
Right. Which makes a certain kind of sense until you have a job that has exceedingly large quantity.
Bug, right? Where you didn't think of that use case. And it comes up, and then poof, you're just screwed.
You know, that's kind of one of the things that I see a lot, because I've gotten into Twitch streaming and doing some gaming stuff, is a lot of streamers, when a patch comes out, the first thing they do is just on stream try to break everything. Like, what can I do to cause this game to crash? I don't care about playing it, completing your objectives. I want to see what I can break. And that still reminds me of, there was a game that came out years ago. It was they had Fable, where you get to make all these decisions, and then as you make them, it changes how your character is, if you're kind of good or kind of bad, things like that. And then they came out with a sequel, Fable 2, where you had a pet dog.
Yep.
And it would help you, it would fight for you and all of these things, but you could also play with it. You could throw a ball. And I remember the designer, I think his name was Peter Molyneux, who was doing a presentation for it, and he said, game testers are really sadistic people, because we showed them this, we let them all try it out, and every single one of them got a hold of that dog, and they took a ball, and the very first thing they did with it is chuck the ball off a cliff and send the dog to its death.
Yep.
Every single one did that, and they weren't talking to each other. They just all said, dog goes where the ball goes, huh? And you just need somebody a little bit malicious to try to break it so that you can find all the things and fix that up as quick as possible.
Yeah, that's absolutely the first thing we do when we get a new SDS2, right? Is, all right, let's take and put in a piece of rolled spiraled material and set the radius to negative 1,000 feet.
Will it twist it up like a pretzel, or will it cause the whole thing to melt?
Yeah, yeah, and since the bailing of Damon Skaggs out of there and the new leadership, we're much more confident that when we press in that negative value, it's going to say, hey, dipshit, you put in a negative value. You can't do that.
Yeah.
There's still a bug in the material edit window. It drives
I was just thinking that. Go ahead.
Bonkers. And there's a bunch of detailers right now going, I know exactly what you're talking about. If you put in the material width first, or the material thickness first, and it's bigger than the material width, it says, oh, you can't do that. But you can't fix it. You can't go and change the material width to match. You have to change the thickness to be bigger than the width, or the other way around.
The thickness must be smaller. Yep.
The thickness to be smaller, and then you got to go and fix the material width to match.
Right.
Like,
but the thickness is the thing that you start with focus, so that's always what you want to type in first.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you've got an 1.5 inch plate, and it's like, you can't have an 1.5 inch thick plate that's only 1 inch wide. My first question is, why the hell not? If that's what I want, you better give it to me. I don't care what you say. Just get out of my way. It's like a connection changed, possibly. Oh,
just make sure it's not 0 or a negative number.
What do you mean you want a shear plate? Happen. You didn't mean shear plate. You meant clip angle. You meant clip angle, right? No, shear plate.
I haven't run into that in a while.
The connection change. That's because you're just not modeling that much.
Yeah,
it's still there.
Is it?
Oh yeah.
I, I've done a few smaller jobs recently, and they were shear plate sorts of connections, and I don't remember getting that as much, but
Connection changed, possibly.
that one always drove me up the wall. And then I remember, hearing, well, if you hit force, it makes it happen. And so, I left walking away like, oh, I guess I'm an idiot. I never tried that, I guess. And then I went and did it, and I was like, it doesn't work. I don't, I don't know why you did that to me, but you made me question everything about myself. And no, I was right. It didn't work. I
So
think they did make Force a lot better though in more recent versions. I think after 2017, Force got a bit more aggressive in the "do what I told you to" department.
so I think SDS2 is in a position now, right, where they have fixed their quality issues for everything that they're writing now. But they still have 30, 40, 50 years of somewhat loose quality standards in their programming. And because I don't want to make it sound too critical, it's little things, right? Like which button has focus when you enter a dialog box, or if a warning window is a child of a parent window, stuff like that, where it works but it doesn't work quite right. Like we'll have this thing constantly where we're waiting for a process to continue, and we're waiting and we're watching and we're going, why is this taking so long? Well, it turns out that there's another dialog box that popped up underneath your window,
The main screen
that you can't see, that it's waiting for you to press OK to that before it continues on.
Yep. I had that happen a lot while trying to sheet load this job, I believe. Was, you pick what are the erection views that you want to put on this sheet. Or actually, I think I encountered it more frequently where I was using a load selection to try to load a bunch of members from a list. And I'd hit load, I pick what I want, and then I hit OK, and then I'm waiting for it to pop up, and then the screen just disappears. And it's like, did it crash? I don't understand. So I'm trying to click in the model because that's now what I'm staring at, because that everything went away. And I had to bring it down and bring it back up, and then the window came to the forefront. I think it was actually in the drawing editor. But, you're just sitting there thinking, what are we waiting on? What's going on? What's taking so long? And yeah, it's in the background, and there's no extra thing flashing or showing up on your taskbar either. So you have no idea that that's there. It's all part of the main window that you're looking at. So yeah, you have to kind of know what's going on and be paying attention to catch stuff like that.
Yeah. So one of the things that didn't make it into 2021 that annoys me is the fixing the title of the window in the taskbar. So like in drawing editor, it would actually say, this drawing editor window has beam 1B5 open, right? And you could see it down there when you moused over it.
Right.
Because I'll do that. I'll have a couple pieces open. I'll have one as a reference. And then when you try to switch from one to the other, you just end up keep switching to the wrong one over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell which is which.
Right. Especially if you've got a bunch of those open.
Yeah. Right. Which, the other thing I would love for SDS2 to fix is to stop treating every time I click show detail in the model as open a new drawing editor window and forget everything that you'd ever had in drawing editor before. Because there's those...
You're talking about like all of your copies and whatnot?
Not copies. The clipboard still works.
Okay.
But
it didn't for a while. I remember that.
Yeah, but like if you draw a label, right, it defaults to whatever you typed last time in the label. And if you click, go to next member, it would go to a filtered list if you used status display. But right now what happens is drawing editor relaunches as a completely new instance and forgets everything that had happened before.
Right.
Which is really, really annoying. That was the biggest difference, or I should say one of the biggest differences that we noticed using SDS2's cloud versus our Unite 3D cloud is the time it took to open drawing editor windows.
Yeah.
And little things. It wasn't an overall speed. Overall, it felt fine. right?
Right.
Fine.
Generally, it was fine.
But there's a thousand tiny little hesitations that it would do when you were trying to mouse over something, when you're trying to select a point. But opening Drawing Editor or running statuses, both were just terribly slow.
Yeah, the status display was shocking and extraordinarily frustrating to our scrubber.
Yeah.
But yeah, we I don't know what was going on there, and we wound up having to trim out so much of the model to get it to work. But it was taking upwards of 60 to 90 seconds just to get a status display to be applied. And then we thought, okay, it's the model's so big that it's got to be that. The model's too big. It's asking too many questions. That's how long it takes. But we threw it into our system, and it took all of 3 seconds to just set it. It's like, well, oh, okay. I guess that excuse is gone. I don't know what the deal is.
Yep.
But in doing that, now that I'm thinking about how that status display worked, it wasn't reading from the model. The way that had to work was it was filtering for detail complete. So it may have had to open every single file individually and check, are you detail complete? Are you within the state range? Speed.
I think
it could be the read write speed.
Yeah, I think that might be what's holding their cloud down.
I wonder what they've got going on there. Yep. I would be really curious to know, if they are using NVMe or something else. If they're using NVMe, then I don't know what on earth is going on.
There's no way they're using NVMe. I would bet they're using SSDs, but I'm betting they're creating virtual hard drives and they're putting too many shared repositories, and they're pinging their read, their IOPS, input outputs per second, is getting killed. That's my guess, right? It's like SDS2, where we don't actually know what's going on. We've got the symptoms, and we have to guess at what's going on inside that's causing that problem. It's
not like being a doctor. It's like being a veterinarian. Trying to figure out what's wrong with a patient that can't tell you what it's feeling.
Well, we ran into, and it occurred to me, I haven't actually talked to you about this yet. I spoke to support at the cloud about that ghosting problem.
What'd you find out
having? And oh god, we've got a joiner. Who could it possibly be? All right, they're gone. I don't know.
I'm not gonna lie. I was 100% hoping that that was gonna be Stuart or Steph that just peeled off the mask and joined the conversation.
If it weren't for the robe, I would have been cool with it. But the robe is absolutely we're just 2 seconds away from getting a flash. And in the detailing community, that's not really something you want to see.
No.
No. So, what the heck were we just talking about? Oh, so we ran into a problem on the cloud with ghosting in Drawing Editor, where you'd get 18 copies of the same view, and I reported it, and they said it's actually there's something with NVIDIA with their grid GPUs, which is the GPUs that they use, and it's a driver issue with remote desktop, this whole thing. And I remember that being a problem before when we were using grid GPUs. We stopped because they weren't actually improving our performance in the model. And they are really expensive to run, but you're much better off. SDS2 actually performs better without a GPU, but with more processor speed to handle that stuff than it does when the GPU is engaged.
So you're saying it's actually better to dial back your GPU performance quality and increase CPU?
Yep.
Okay.
Which I would never have known, but we tried it both ways, and throwing more memory and more CPU at it was much cheaper. And I don't know if that's specific to grid GPUs. I don't know if that's going to apply to a local machine. But it certainly was the fact for a cloud server that attaching that, and we can, because using AWS, we can either attach a GPU or pay say 13 cents an hour or whatever, or we can take it off, and our performance actually increased when we took that GPU off of there.
So I know that I want to say 2016. I think the change from 2016 to 2017 is where they boosted and brought forward the OpenGL to current standards, whereas before it was running on like a Windows 95 version of OpenGL. Didn't that do something different with how the GPU is utilized?
It did. I don't know what it was, right? But between 2017 and 2018, they made a significant change to how the graphics were displayed. It might have been 2016-17, but I think it's
2016-17 was the big shift.
And we had to change the machines that we're using to be much faster, right? To be able to handle it. We did get a performance increase. There was other stuff that went along with it to improve things, but it was a really fundamental change. I have no idea what it was that they did with that was different in that time.
I know that they did bring up the OpenGL standard. They made that modernized, but and it was supposed to be, because I remember that was the big thing was they'd always said, hey, it doesn't actually utilize your GPU. I mean, everybody wants a great graphics card because they think, oh, it's all this 3D rendering and I want this gaming graphics card to handle it. And it's like, nah, it's all handled by your CPU. The GPU is not doing anything for that. I mean, it's fine for all of your other applications, but it didn't do anything for SDS. So when they made that change, that was what I thought they were doing, was shifting the stress off from the CPU and onto the GPU to try to handle that better.
Well, and I think that's kind of the ironic point. Like at SDS2, they can't tell you definitively, right? This is going to be your bottleneck. And we've never been able to figure that out either, but through a whole bunch of testing, right? All we can say is when we've done these things, it works.
Right.
Right. And obviously the number one that you can absolutely guarantee you need the most that you can get is hard drive speed.
Right. Read writes that's king.
Right. But it would be really nice too if they had a benchmark for, okay, for X number of users, you can expect this many input out, read writes a second. So take that and multiply it by however how many users you need, and that's how much hard drive speed you need.
I think that's going to be so variable though, because if you're dealing with a small job versus, let's say you've got 100,000 members and you're going to process all of them at once.
Right. But if they gave you something, right, you can expect to run, a 500-ton job at this many, because once you get over 500 tons, sequencing takes over. And you're never looking at that whole model, or you shouldn't be looking at that whole model at the same time.
Right.
There's no reason for that. Turn that stuff off. But before that, it would be nice if we had, on average, a user does this many reads and writes a day. This is what their peak is. And then you could, select a hard drive that would kick that out of the water. But
what I think you need then is you need to create a standard, and you need like a 200-ton vetted by several detailers. This is an average job that I want everything to be based on, all of your benchmarks to come from. So I want to know how long should it take to process this entire job if I mark it for detailing, or mark it for processing. How long will it take to detail it with or without templates? How long will it take to do all of these things? Like, what are the requirements to get this to happen? And then everything has to refer to that benchmark. So you really just need this available benchmarking model that everyone could grab and try out, because then you can compare and say, well, if I had this hardware that they're recommending, I run the standard model through it and I'm not getting that. Well, I need to increase my system. Maybe my system's a little weak, or I'm crushing that. My system's, out of control. It's fantastic. It's just, going to beat that to death. But they have that model that they use for a lot of the presentations. It's that same model we've been seeing for 20 years. Yeah, and it's too small. It's too small. It's fine for demonstrating the connection that they want to show you, or a statusing or something like that, because it's going to be quick for demonstration purposes. But you need something obnoxious. It has to have beams, joists, trusses, vertical and horizontal braces, catwalks, gratings, stairs, hangers, all kinds of garbage all over the place. Just that standard nonsense job that does a little bit of everything. It's got rolled materials and all that stuff. And it's just, that's the gold standard benchmark job that we'll benchmark everything with. And then you could start to develop a benchmarking process to see how your system is standing up to recommended hardware.
Yep. All right, we're closing in on 2 hours here. I think we should wrap it up. Anything? Any questions out of the chat before we jam? Any questions from you, Matthew? Anything else you want to get off your head? Pimp out your Twitch stream.
Oh.
How do they find you? Put it down and send me a link. I'll post it in the chat.
All right.
So when do you stream, and what do you stream?
So I stream video games. It's mostly Phasmophobia, and I do a little bit of Raft, and I haven't got into too much else. We occasionally play like Among Us, and it's Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And I've also got a YouTube channel, so highlights and just compilation videos from the stream get dumped out to that.
So one other thing I want to mention is Matt is not wearing sunglasses indoors to look cool. Those are color blindness correction glasses.
Yes.
And they make it so he can see his status displays better than he can outside of it. That's so it doesn't make you be able to see all colors, but it makes you to be able to see more colors. Is that right?
It allows me to separate colors, and that's huge because especially on this job, there were some color-coded details.
Yep.
And I went to start modeling this in, and I was absolutely lost because to me, I didn't realize it was color-coded. I thought it was just all blue. And it turns out it was some blue, some purple, and some red, and it was like, oh, it's a whole different world when I put these on.
A whole new world. See,
a whole new world.
Oh, the other thing is we've got to get to the we've got to get registered for the SDS2 conference in Florida in September. I'm excited to be there. I hope you are too. I haven't heard back on whether they like the idea that I posted as for something I'd speak on. I really don't care what I speak on, right? But I said how to get paid as a detailer. Thought that would be a good one. Because they could use some content that's not just SDS2 for people who are bored, although it is an SDS2 conference.
But, you kind of want to deliver the total package because it's not like there's a detailing conference that I'm aware of anyway.
I mean, technically there's an NISD conference 2 days before the NASCC in the same location, but nobody goes.
Right.
So
yeah, being able to talk about things like, what are the other pieces of software that you use? Project management, chatting with people, your cloud stuff, as far as, remote offices, things like Zoom or Google Meet or whatever it is you're using. There's just so much that we do SDS takes up a screen. I have 3 monitors and they're all filled with stuff.
Yep.
Bluebeam, obviously huge. And you've done some videos on some different things that you can do with Bluebeam that go beyond the scope of what, the basic user get into. A lot of that power user stuff is really handy, even talking about, you could talk for quite a while on the gaming keyboards and mice that we use.
Yeah.
Scripting things, automating things. I don't sit here and type out, you know, no paint top flange, wire to ship. I have a keyboard button that I just bang on and it just boom, there's my label, no questions asked.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of stuff to talk about. So if you're not registered, if you weren't planning on going, consider it. I know it is Florida. It is hurricane season. That's when they're having it. It's still better than Nebraska, right? Even with the hurricane, I'd still probably pick Florida over Nebraska to visit. So, all right.
The one thing I can always say about Lincoln, though, it is the cleanest city I have ever walked around in.
That part of the city.
Well, okay, that part.
Yeah, you're right next to the stadium. If you go to any city and you go to their most popular tourist attraction, the immediate 5-minute walk around that is always super clean.
It's immaculate.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. See, Rochester just looks like the whole place has been burned and melted by acid rain all the time.
Yeah.
Everything just looks dirty and corroded. So it was always strange to be like, so bright here and clean.
Yeah. No, if you go to Cleveland, hang out around the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or the any of the stadiums, it's gorgeous. It's perfect.
It's the same way.
Right. Walk a little bit further, and it's a different issue. But all right, that's it for our live stream today. Come back, let us know what you want to hear about, what you want to see, and we'll get it up for you as soon as possible. Hopefully, upcoming soon, we'll have a detailer who recently transitioned from Tekla to SDS2 wants to come on the channel and talk with us about what that process was like. Can't wait to hear from him. We'll see you back here next time on the Steel Forum.